No. Okay. Well, then maybe I can just give my name and information. Do they want that on the tape too?
Yeah, that you're the interviewer.
Okay. Maybe this is less.
Okay, pause.
Algeria to Tunisia.
Right. And they went into
Then
Sicily.
they went to Sicily, and then they ended up in the 7th Army, going into southern France.
Right. They were constantly being reattached, if that's
Yeah,
the proper
right.
term.
Yeah, they formed the 7th Army, which landed at Marseille
Right.
for the southern France. All you hear about is the Normandy invasion, but there was another invasion
That's
too
right.
in southern.
And that was a very important one.
Yeah, and then of course we went on through it.
Yeah. He said he never made it off. They never went off of Sicily. So
Didn't he?
they
Yeah.
must have been reassigned.
Uh-huh.
So, well,
I just need you
Go right
to
ahead.
sign this another time.
I'll do it today, yeah.
Afterwards. And otherwise, let me know if you need anything, okay? Just step out
Sure.
and ask Pat and she'll come and get me. Or I guess Jen will be out there at the desk, but just at the front desk in the gift shop. Come and get me if you need anything.
okay, Heather.
Take your time, there's no rush.
Yeah, I've got time. I hope Les has the time.
Sure.
And you got that on?
Good.
Okay. Well, Les, as you know, this is a Library of Congress project.
Mhm.
And we're trying to get your thoughts about your experience in the service. So let me just tell the tape. I'm Jim Carozza. I'm conducting the interview for the Chemung County Historical Society. And you go by Les.
I go by my middle name. Of course, when you go in the Army, you go by your first name, whether you go by it or not.
Okay. So
Charles.
So you're Charles.
Yeah, but I always go by my middle name.
Okay, so this is
But
Charles
in the Army-
Cosgrove.
Yes, in the Army they call me Charlie,
Oh.
but I don't go by that name. I go by my middle name, Lester, or Les.
And you've been going by that name all your
Yeah,
life.
I went by it before I went in and after.
So, all right. Well, basically, I've just got some guideline questions, and obviously you've been trying to be interviewed for quite a while.
Well, no, I came in here about a month or so ago,
Oh, okay.
and she told me to follow up. And then I read the paper where you really got flooded with people with interviews. I don't know, I really want doing this. But my grandchildren and my boys says, and I'm almost 85. I'm 84 years old.
You wear it
Yeah,
well.
and my days are short.
Well,
And they said, well, in fact, I'm glad to get this back because I'm in the middle of writing a book or a journal on these experiences, and mostly to give to my grandchildren. And but I have been approached by my division to do some writing on the experience of the Fort Observer. You don't read too much about Fort Observer.
Forward Observer.
Yeah.
Okay.
They are the
Could you
most-
just describe that for myself?
A Fort Observer is a man that adjusts the artillery fire on the enemy.
Okay.
And he does that. He has a radio operator with him, and you get as far forward as you can. You're generally with the infantry or in front of the infantry, or you're working with partisans and behind the lines, barricaded in a church steeple, or if it's going to be a tank attack, then you go out in the lead tank and keep the artillery fire. If you're if you're supporting an infantry unit, you go with a attacking platoon of the infantry to keep the fire, adjust the artillery fire in front of our infantry.
Call back the coordinates.
Yeah, and then if you're on a static front like we were on the Arno River in Italy, or the Po River, where the enemy's on one side and you're on the other side for days, and then you're up in a Piper Cub, flying over the German lines and adjusting the fire on the enemy from Piper Cub. Most Fort Observers, I was in the 1st Armored Division. That was my division.
Okay.
And most Fort Observers are second lieutenants, but in an armored division, they have a different table of organizations. The Forward Observer are generally second lieutenants, and the staff sergeant, reconnaissance sergeant. That's what I got.
Okay.
So, and you're generally a team. There's two men, one running the radio and one looking through the binoculars and adjusting the fire. Sometimes I would go out with a lieutenant, and we would switch off duties, and then other times I would go out and I'd have another enlisted man with me. So it, depending on who was available.
Now, what was your qualifications to be a forward observer? Obviously, you
Oh,
had to
I
have...
went in the Army under the Selective Service, and I went in February 12th of 1941, and I had just come off of Carolina maneuvers, and I'd been in the Army 10 months, and back to Fort Knox, Kentucky, where we trained. That's the home of the Armored Force.
Right.
And laying there on my bunk because they were discharging us Selective Service people early, because back in those days they were bringing everybody into the draft, into the Army, and they didn't have room, so instead of serving your full year, they were letting a lot of the men out prior to that. I had 10 months in, and they told me I was going to be discharged.
Wow.
I was laying on my bunk there in a bed. Well, it was Pearl Harbor Day, December 8th. December 8th, I was laying there on a Sunday, and they were even handing out discharges on a Sunday to get us out. And I'm laying there waiting for my discharge when it came over the radio of Pearl Harbor. And about an hour later, it came over the radio, all discharges, leaves, everything was canceled.
Wow.
So I put another 3.5 years on top of that. On that.
Let me ask you a question.
But as a forward observer, I went into the 91st Field Artillery Battalion. There were 3 battalions in a division.
Right.
And I went into the 91st. There was some other local boys here in that battalion, and a number of Corning. I originally came from Corning.
Okay.
And went into the 91st and the 68th Field there, and went into training down at Fort Knox, and was then on maneuvers. So my training was on hands training in the field with actually adjusting artillery fire.
They weren't looking for engineering backgrounds? Or...
No. Well, most of the second lieutenants were OCS.
Okay. But they were looking...
Not OCS.
Officers trained?
ROTC.
ROTC, I see.
Yeah. Most of our officers were ROTC. And then we had some 90-day wonders. OTC.
As the war progressed, there were
Yeah.
more and more 90-day
Yeah.
wonders,
Yeah,
as the term
I had
was.
2 opportunities to take a battlefield commission, which I turned down because I was on the top of the list to come home on rotation. And if I had accepted the commission, I'd have been the lowest ranking second lieutenant in my division.
I see.
So I ended up the same as the staff sergeant. Although at one point I did reach top sergeant, but it was a temporary deal back in the States after I was sent home. And that's another story in itself.
Well,
That's sort of
as
cool.
we progress, feel free to tell it.
Yeah,
You know.
that's down the line.
Okay.
But my training actually as a forward observer, I was a reconnaissance sergeant. And my job was in an armored division as the tanks and infantry move forward and the artillery is right. We had self-propelled artillery. We had 105 millimeters mounted on tank chassis. My job was to locate good artillery positions that had defilade or were screened.
Defilade, like camouflage almost?
Defilade, yeah.
Okay.
That's when you've got high bank in front of you, So the enemy can't shoot at you directly, you'd have to shoot up over. My job as recon sergeant, as you advanced, was to select positions, and I was in charge of the fire direction section of men that would adjust with aiming circles and transits, adjust the guns as they come in. Then after everything was settled down, if they needed me, then I went out as a forward observer to adjust that fire onto the enemy. Yeah.
Well,
That's basically what my job was there
it's a very,
in
it was a
Africa,
very important job.
North Africa.
Very dangerous job too, I might say.
Yeah. But my career started, of course, not career, but
Your military career.
yeah, my military time started pulling out of Corning on a train back there in February 12th of 1941. Went to Fort Niagara, or went to Buffalo, and they took us to the Hotel Buffalo, all the local guys on the train, and then they swore us in, took us to Fort Niagara, and then at Fort Niagara, 2 days later, they loaded us on trains and took us to Fort Knox, Kentucky. Now, at this point, World War II had not, we were not in the war.
Correct.
And at Fort Knox, Kentucky, is a cavalry post, and of course, that's where the gold wall was. And when I arrived there, they were still riding horses. Cavalry is also tanks, you know.
Right.
So they had to get rid of the tank horses and bring in the tanks. So we formed the 1st Armored Division. That's the 1st Tank Division. I was in it when it was formed. And we went immediately to Louisiana and the Louisiana maneuvers in the summer of 1941, and maneuvered there, and it was in the battle of the Red and the Blue armies and capturing Baton or Shreveport. Then when the maneuvers ended there, we moved all the way to the Carolinas, and we had another month or so maneuvers. During that period, in between transferring from Louisiana to Carolina, my father had died, and they couldn't locate me. Of course, I was in between, and
Okay, in between.
then when they finally located me, they had held a funeral longer. They could do that, and so I had a chance to come home for a few days after the funeral. So after the Carolinas maneuvers, we went back to Fort Knox, and that's when I told you about laying there in the bunk waiting to be discharged.
Right, they were going to
Then
start
they
mustering people out.
yeah, then they loaded us straight on trains and not on trains, and we took all of our tracked vehicles. We loaded on flat cars or tanks and half track, and all our wheeled vehicles, and we drove from Fort Knox, Kentucky, all the way to to Fort Dix, New Jersey.
Mhm.
And in Fort Dix, we were only there a short time. We were guarding installations up and down the coast there temporarily, because if you remember the story about the Japanese landing, some Germans that were going to sabotage New York City.
Right,
And we were involved in that.
protecting industrial
yeah.
sites, Navy
We
yards.
were involved in that, guarding that for a while. Then we loaded on a ship and went to Ireland. When we left, we thought we were going right into the fight. And we landed in Belfast, Northern Ireland. And we were moved inland to, you want me to tell this like this is?
I like it.
Okay.
No,
I'm
let me interrupt you for a
I'm just
second.
hitting a high spot.
They've given me some leading questions, and
Yeah.
just in case
Okay.
your memory is a little
Yeah.
slow, but your memory
No,
is not.
that's the only thing that's left on me is my memory.
This is excellent. I mean, I think this is a good way for you to get your story
Now
out.
you're gonna hear something about Northern Ireland that very few people in the world know about. That's been kept that was hushed up. We were sent to Northern Ireland, and we landed in Belfast, and they took us, loaded us on trains. I got a little story here. When we landed in Belfast, they marched, after he took us off the ship, they marched us through Belfast. As we're marching down the main street, here's the big sign that says Cosgrove's Pub.
Wow.
So
you're of Irish ancestry?
oh yeah, I'm
Okay.
related to the first president of Ireland, who was Cosgrove,
Okay,
the first president of the Free State.
right.
And anyhow, and my buddies all said, "Is that any relation?" I said, "I don't know, but we're gonna get a chance. We're gonna find out."
Right, certainly.
So anyhow, we loaded on a train, went down to Southern Ireland, and we eventually ended up into a little town called Kilkeel and Newry, which is on the border of the Free State and Northern Ireland.
Right.
Now, the war is on, of course, at this point. As you know, the Free State was neutral, supposedly.
And with maybe some German
Well, that's what happened. They put us, we didn't know this.
favoritism.
But the second night we were there, the IRA came across the border and shot up our motor pool. And I wrote home, told my mother, I said, my ancestors over here are shooting at me. So anyhow, all they were after was ammunition and arms and so forth. So then they, after a while, they moved us back to Newcastle, Ireland, and then back to Belfast, and then they loaded us on cattle barges and took us across the
The
Irish Channel,
Irish Sea?
Irish Sea to Scotland. We landed in Stranraer, Scotland. We were in Scotland. And then they moved us to Glasgow. We were there a few days. Then they loaded us on trains and took us to Newcastle, England, Newcastle-under-Lyme. And that was an area full of war factories and so forth. But we were there and maneuvering around the countryside there, and had chances there occasionally to go into London on pass. Now, London at this time, this is the point in time between the Blitz and what was the things they fired over?
The
bombs.
right.
And so it was sort of a quiet period and was real enjoyable.
Okay.
But occasionally a few German bombers would come over, and a couple of times on pass was really our first experience of
Combat or
right there was having
potential danger other than the
dropping.
IRA
The IRA.
night raid.
Well, what happened with the IRA, they eventually agreed what was happening. They were really refueling their, Germans were using the ports to refuel their submarines and everything.
In their battle, in
They
their
were
North
supposed to be
Atlantic.
neutral, see.
Right.
So when we threatened to invade Southern Ireland, they immediately said, okay, we're going to be like Switzerland, we're going to be neutral. No country at war will use our war submarines and battleships, and will use our ports. So from that point on, there was no problem. In fact, there were a number of Irish brigades from Southern Ireland that did fight against the Germans, that even though they were a neutral country, they were volunteer
Right,
brigades.
under the Great
Of course, there
Britain.
were a lot of Irish from Northern Ireland because they were in the British Army, mostly in the
Right.
British 8th Army. And we went there to England, and from England we loaded, they moved us to Liverpool, where we loaded on boats there, and as they loaded the boats, when the men at the boats, they would pull out in the harbor, and they would drop anchor until another boats load up until the convoy is all ready to go. They give the signal to go, and everybody goes with us. Our anchor was fouled.
What do you mean fouled? It just wasn't working
They
properly?
couldn't get it up.
Oh,
It hung up on the bottom, and so the convoy couldn't wait. This is
Right.
the invasion convoy.
You can't wait.
North Africa.
Right, you can't wait for one ship.
Yeah, so the convoy takes off and leaves us there, and of course that convoy met a convoy coming over from the US. And as it took them almost 2 days, they had to send divers down to free the anchor. And we sailed with this big troop ship right off the coast of France, no escort or nothing, through German wolf packs.
Yourself in a,
Yeah,
in a
yeah.
big troop transport.
Yeah, and the big transfer was the Duchess of Richmond was the name of the boat.
Oh, you had to be
And
nervous.
just as we were going through the Straits of Gibraltar, getting ready to land, they sunk the ship behind me, the U-boats. We just caught up with the convoy, just as it was about to enter the Straits of Gibraltar, and just as we caught up with the convoy, we were attacked by German submarines. And then that boat that they sank was full of ATS girls. They were like our wax, loaded with girls from England.
They were in the service,
Yeah,
women
they were
in the
that
service.
boat, and they did they saved most of them. I think there was very few of them. The destroyers, I went to pick them up. I think they got practically all of them. But they did raise that submarine, forced it to the surface, and brought it in the harbor the next day.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So we landed at Oran, and the other.
That's Tunisia?
That's in Algeria.
Algeria, Oran?
Yeah, and then around the corner of Africa, Patton and the second armored, I was in the first armored, the second armored landed at Casablanca.
Okay.
So then we eventually joined up, defeated the Germans there, and when we went in there, we went in with the 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One, and the 9th Infantry Division, you just mentioned.
Yeah.
And at that point, during Africa, we never had an army. We only had a corps, 2nd Corps. There were just enough American divisions to make a corps. And a corps is generally 3 or more divisions. Generally around 5 divisions in a corps. And generally 3 or more corps makes an army.
Right, but the
But
American.
they never only had the 2nd Corps in Africa.
Right.
The 5th Army originated when we landed, of course, in Italy.
Okay.
Yeah, we had them. But then we landed there, North Africa. Our other field artillery battalion went in days ahead of us, and they took a terrible beating, and our infantry was practically annihilated because we were supposed to land in North Africa unopposed. The Free French, the Northern Ireland, Africa, that part of Africa was Vichy France.
Right.
Okay, but General Clark and a few men had landed by submarine there days before the invasion, and supposedly had made arrangements that we were to come in unopposed.
The Vichy would not put up a fight.
Yeah, but they changed their mind last minute and sank the first 3 boats that went in the harbor full of men, and then the rest of the men, the boats went on up and landed up coast, and eventually we captured Oran from coming around from the rear. But there were no Germans there, just maybe a few from their armistice commission.
Just
High-ranking.
Just try to keep an eye on the Vichy government.
The only troops that we fought were French.
Oh, that's it.
And,
I did not
and they had old tanks from World War I, and their equipment was quite obsolete, but they put up quite a fight. And then when we captured Oran, the 1st and the 2nd Armored with Patton captured Casablanca, then there was nothing until you went about, 1,600 miles across North Africa to Tunisia.
Right. Let me interrupt you for a second.
Sure.
Is your capacity as a forward artillery observer, now, I assume this is pretty much desert terrain?
Yeah, North Africa and the desert is separated by the Atlas Mountains.
Okay.
All across North Africa is a string of mountains, the Atlas Mountains. They, from the mountains to the sea varies from maybe at points of 50 to 100 miles.
I see,
width
so.
and that's a very fertile section.
Right, so your job was.
And then, but once you got into Tunisia, you ran out of the edge of those and you ran into the desert.
Now, what could you do when you were trying to decide where the artillery should be placed in the desert? I mean, what?
Well, what you do, an observer, he's called upon by the infantry or by the tanks, or we have different observers looking for different things. Fort observer, he's called, in our division, he's given a call sign of, he's a Fox, F-O-X. And my call sign was like Fox 12. Fox 1 was our colonel, who was in the air all the time. And a very brave man. And but if you until artillery, an observer spots enemy artillery or enemy tanks or enemy infantry, then of course his job immediately is to get artillery fire onto that.
Okay.
And if I'm adjusting the artillery of my particular battery, which is 6 guns, and and if I'm just out as an observer for just my battery, I just look for targets, TO targets of opportunity.
So you're more or less trying to find targets as opposed
to. Now, if in front of me is a regiment from the 9th Infantry Division, I go out and I contact the company commander and find out which regiment or which company is going to attack and where they want me,
right,
where they want the artillery fire. If they want it a barrage ahead of them, or if they want me to just go along with them and only when they run into a strong point, a machine gun nest or something like that, then they'll call on me to do it. Or unless I see it myself through my binoculars. And it's the same way if it's going to be a tank attack. I'm in a tank, and I have a radio, and I'm in contact with the company or the tank commander that's running, whether it's a captain or lieutenant, and
your guns, your batteries, they would be following you. I mean, it's like
well, yeah.
Yeah.
We in an armored division there are 3 battalions of artillery. There are I was in the 91st battalion, and it has 3 batteries. Each battery has 6 guns, or a total of 18 guns. Then you have 2 other battalions that has 18 guns, the 68th and the 27th field. And and you if you're on a static front where you're in the same position for days, your job might be your battery might be just firing what we call harassing fire. Out there somewhere there's a crossroads the enemy is using all the time, and you just fire ladder barrages up and down like that, and you move it. And
just to keep the enemy on its toes.
You can either do that by direct observation fire by my seeing, or you can do it from map data. Just, they have sounding equipment. They can locate enemy guns when you can't see them by the sound and the flash. And then you look on you transpose that to your map, and you can see on the map, maybe there's a deep gully, well, that's a natural place to put an artillery. So you just fire on that from your map data.
So once
So
again, yeah,
that's how
it's not
the
just,
artillery fire is placed on the enemy.
there's a
Most of
method
it
to
is
everything.
direct by an observer.
Right.
Yeah. There are times when I was in northern Italy, up in northern Italy, that we went ahead of the infantry, like when we took the town of Pontedera on the Arno River. We tried to capture Pisa directly, and we couldn't, so we went upriver and to capture the town of Pontedera. And we hadn't taken Pontedera yet, and there was a young Italian girl that came to us that was familiar with the town, and she led me and lieutenant and a radio operator through the lines at night, and we got in this church steeple. And we barricaded, we took a platoon of infantry with us, and we barricaded ourselves in church, and the enemy is all around us.
The Germans now, this is the.
They didn't know we were in there.
Right.
We could look down and see them. And so we were in a good position then when they took to take the town, where we could really knock anything out to oppose the infantry.
Now, this would have been approximately what time were you in northern Italy? Was
Well,
that
that was
1944?
Yeah, well, all of 44. Yeah.
But you were.
I'm just getting ahead of myself.
No, I know, and we can go back at any time. But
But
basically, the Germans were the ones who were holding Italy. The Italian.
oh yeah.
Italian army
There were a few Italian units that were fought with them right until the end. I forget the name of the Italian division. It was they were diehard fascists. Mostly all of the Italian men belonged to the fascist party, but that didn't mean anything. It was like our unions. If you didn't belong to the union, you didn't work here.
Right.
If you didn't belong to the fascist party, you didn't work in Italy. And I had that explained to me. But they only a very few of them were really diehard supporters of fascism.
Or Mussolini, or the war in general.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, let me interrupt you for a second, just to get some basic details down. You enlisted in the Army.
Yep.
Yeah,
I
why?
wanted to get my year over.
Oh, okay. You thought.
Yeah, the work was bad. I was working at Corning Glass
Uh-huh.
at the time, living in Corning, and work was slow, and I could see where I was going to be drafted. So I said, well, this is a good time to get my year over with. Go and get it over with. So
Okay.
that's how I come to go in. So I enlisted. Of the about 100 of us went in under that contingent from Corning. And I would say probably 80 of them were volunteers.
Now, why did you choose the Army as a branch of service?
Oh, that's a good question. I really don't know.
Okay.
My father was in the Army in World War I over in France, but that's not the reason I went in it. And he never talked about it. But I think that at that point in time, under the Draft Act, that the majority were going into the Army.
That was the service
Yeah,
that they were trying to fill.
Most of them were,
Okay.
or most were needed. And If you went in under the draft act, you went where you were.
Certainly, assigned,
Oh.
yes.
And if you wanted to go in the Navy, I would have had to enlist it for 3 years.
I see,
But I
okay,
couldn't, you can't enlist under the draft act.
right,
You go and serve a year and you come out. But you go where they tell you to go.
right,
So that's the reason.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, you already discussed your first few days in the service, actually your first
Yeah.
year, you were being part of this new armored battalion, and you were
Yeah.
gone from Louisiana over to Carolinas.
They got rid of the horses and brought in World War I tanks, and then they started bringing in some of the
Let me ask
new
you,
tanks.
your instructors at Knox,
Yeah.
now they had to be old cavalry instructors, I
Mostly
was.
all were old cavalrymen, horsemen, and some of them were, they did have some tanks, in World War I.
Right,
And some of them, like Patton, were tankers. They had training in the old World War I tanks.
so how were your feelings towards your instructors and vice versa about this, obviously, this changing technology? I mean, were they
Well,
willing
yeah.
to try and adapt to the armored division?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they were, first of all, either West Pointers or men with college education that smart enough to know that the days of the horses were gone.
Okay.
No more Indians.
Oh, my God.
No more Indians to fight. You don't need tanks to fight Indians.
Okay, my next questions, but you've been answering them, is describing where you were in the service, and we'll get back to that.
Sure.
And obviously, you just told me you did see combat. Now, and I'm amazed at your dangerous position.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not amazed, it is a dangerous position. So the question is, were there many casualties in your unit? And I gotta believe, obviously, yes. You just
Oh,
mentioned
yeah. As we got into Tunisia, we went across, I went on a flat car in the back end of a half track all the way across North Africa. And we were jumped a couple of times by German airplanes, Messerschmitts, and most of the time we were escorted by British bullfighters, the train going across. We landed we pulled into a railhead I can't think of the name of the town, no.
my geography of Northern Africa.
Anyhow, it was a short drive from there to the town of Sabatla.
Uh-huh.
And that's, if you saw the movie Patton,
Yeah,
when Patton was driving along in a Jeep and he says, stop, the battle's over here. And he went over there and there was ruins.
right.
And he says, I was there and fought. That movie was those rooms, the exact room. That movie was made right there. And that was my first position, right in those rooms.
Oh, okay. Very
In
interesting.
Sabatla.
Right.
And then I went on a reconnaissance the next day with a lieutenant and a captain to the town of Sidi Bouzid, where we ran into the Germans, and to make contact with the French who were holding the pass. And at this point in time, the French had decided to fight.
Against,
The organized French units decided to fight against the Germans.
with the Allies.
Yeah, so they pulled back and was holding this pass until we got there, Fayed Pass.
What present-day country is Bazid in, do you know?
Sidi Bouzid?
Yes.
That's Tunisia.
Tunisia, okay.
Yeah, yeah, that's just beyond Kasserine Pass.
Right.
So we went through Kasserine to Sidi Bouzid, and then we were we took our first casualties going to City Bazit the next day after I came back from the reconnaissance. Made contact where we were going to put the guns and so forth the next day. And we were bombed and strafed from that point on almost every day. There weren't very few American planes over there at that point. When an airplane came, you automatically shot at it. You didn't wait to identify it because it was German.
Right.
And so
They had been in North
Then-
Africa for
yeah,
2 years,
then,
at least.
yeah, the Eighth Army was fighting Rommel and was fighting the Eighth Army further down the coast. And this was a point in El Alamein when Montgomery finally broke through and was pushing Rommel north, pushing him into us.
Right.
And then that was a continuous buildup of units appearing on our front that had come from, were retreating from fighting the British Eighth Army. So there was a lot of activity in that area. We took the first day we pulled in, we were on a forward slope of a hill, which you never do with artillery on a forward slope, because they're looking straight at you.
Right, you,
And
as
I-
you mentioned
and I
earlier,
didn't-
you're
we
always
didn't pick
looking.
that position, we were told to take it. We lost our first men the day before in a minefield. Bert Otis, he was from the Otis family, very prominent family in New York, West New York, New Jersey, and ran over a mine, and we took a bunch of casualties. The next day when we took a terrific pasting on that forward slope from German self-propelled guns. That's what we had to suffer.
Right,
Artillery.
but you were exposed to their guns.
Yeah, so we took it for a couple of hours, and we had a number of wounded and lost the equipment. We finally had to pull back about a half a mile. But we learned our first lesson there. You don't move towards the enemy until you have a forward observer out in front of you. So we were caught with no observer out there, and that's exactly what happened. So finally, an observer on a hill to our right with the 1st Infantry spotted the German guns that were shooting at us and adjusted one of our other batteries. In artillery, if you're shelling an enemy battery and he's shelling you, we call that a duel. Now, if the men have their choice, they can stay on the guns through that shelling and fight it out, gun against gun. But, which we did later on when we became more confident. Or you could get in your holes and let one of our other batteries that wasn't being shelled.
Hopefully have a better angle.
So that's what happened there. One of our other batteries knocked the German battery out. So, we were supposed to, land there and then go right on through and take Tunis and desert it. But of course, the whole German army was there. And they broke out of the pass this one morning very early. And the night before they broke out, I was out on an observation post and I could hear tanks, and I knew in the sound they weren't our tanks. So I radioed back and they gave me the answer that it was our tanks, which it wasn't. So when dawn came, it's all the whole German Panzer Division coming out of the pass straight at us. And then
Just yourself and your radio operator?
Yeah, well, yeah, I was out there alone at that time.
Okay.
I went out, the captain sent me out. We had put an anti-tank gun out on our front, and he wasn't reporting in. They hadn't run a telephone line to him, and he had just one of these hand-set walkie-talkies. And he didn't report in, so the captain told me to go out and find him and see what the story was. And while I was there, I spotted all these German tanks coming, and I'm watching them, and I tried to raise the battery on the radio, and I couldn't. And about that time, I hear a noise, and look, and here comes a bunch of German tanks from the other side, from another pass.
You're out there by yourself?
Yeah, I'm there by myself at this point. And I got up on a knoll, and I could see a bunch of our men that they had already captured. And they spotted me immediately. Come right up with a tank, and this blonde-headed German gets out of the tank and says, "You're a prisoner of the Third Reich." And he took my pistol and took my class ring, and he says, and I give him a
Is he speaking English or German?
very fluent English, yeah. And he said that I'm taking your ring because if I don't take it, one of the rear echelon boys is going to take it. So I said, well, if that's going to be the story, I'd rather you have it. So he says, he pointed back where that bunch of prisoners were, that they were run. Says, you walk back there and join them. So then he took right on off. And finally, after he took off, I started to go back towards this group, and I said, and I didn't see the tank anymore, and I figured, well, gee, I can get back, walk around and get back to my outfit. And that's what I did. And they never spotted me. I ran a couple of 100 yards, and I saw another tank coming, and I ran into an Arab tent there. Some Arabs, and they motioned for me to come in the tent. And I went in the tent, and there was 3 GIs already in the tent. They were hiding also. And he was hiding us from the Germans.
Right.
So we was in the tent there maybe a half hour, and the battle it was kind of a lull in the battle, and the shooting had subsided a little, and we could see more tanks coming in German infantry, and they said, "Oh, if we're,
You're gonna get
we're going to get captured again," And
so the Germans would leave the Arabs alone, or I mean?
Yeah, the Arabs they helped the Germans, they helped us. They just wanted to see a good fight. You couldn't never rely on them. And, I'll tell you another story about them later. But anyhow, so I looked out, I saw this infantry coming in the distance, and I knew there was a deep wadi just about 50 yards away. We figured if we got in that wadi, we could get back around.
Wadi is like a ravine?
Yeah, it's a ravine. In the rainy season, it has water. It's a river. So the guys in the tent, I said, I don't know what you guys are going to do, but I'm going out of this tent and run like that wadi. So 2 of them did, and one guy said, no, he said, I will get machine gun if we run out. No. So he stayed in the tent and was captured again and spent the whole war in prison camp. But we ran, got in the ravine, and never spotted us, and I got back in my outfit, and they were just getting ready to pull back then because they could see the German tanks and back through the town the city was in. And then all of the infantry and tanks, and there were tremendous tank battles going on all around us. We lost over 200 tanks within a matter of just a few hours. And tanks burning all over the place, and all of our infantry on the mountains in front of us are all mostly the 1st Infantry Division and the infantry from our division, the 6th, were encircled, so there was no way to relieve them. my battery fought the rear guard action going back to the city was
To
that
help,
back to
support the
a
retreat.
place called Kearns Crossroads.
Kearns Crossroads.
And that was a prominent in the World War II history. Then we set up our first defense there, where we finally slowed the onslaught. Then stragglers would drift through each hour, so a tank would make it back through, or a bunch of infantry, or an artillery piece. We lost B battery. My B battery was to our left, and we lost the whole battery. They were overrun completely, all taken prisoner, guns, men, and everything. 100 and some men. But we only lost 2 tanks on the retreat back. We were fired at by direct fire from German tanks, and we lost 2 of our tanks. And we got into Kearns Crossroads, we ran into the 68th field, and they were had their guns in place. So we joined them at that point to put up a defense. Then we pulled back to the next day to the very same ruins in Sabela, where we'd started out a week or so before.
Right.
And then we got orders to move back through Kasserine Pass. And then you know all about the Battle of Kasserine Pass. That's where Rommel was finally defeated in
Right.
North Africa, his first real big defeat that he had.
Yeah.
And then after we stopped them there at Kasserine Pass, we were moved all the way north, because the German First Army was up in the northern part, up around Bizerti at that time. And we went in position there near the town of, it was before you get to Mature. But we went through the valley there, and there was the Battle of Hill 609, which was in Life magazine. And I have it, I should have brought that with me. The whole page of Life magazine showing exact, I can show you the exact stone fence that I was behind in the battle. And
Let me say something here, Les.
Yeah.
Your recall is excellent.
Yeah.
Your memory is always excellent.
Yeah.
I mean, you're remembering the battalions and
Yeah.
the cities, and you
Yeah.
know. Do you go over this a lot in your mind, or is this something that?
no, once in a while.
I mean, you're trying to put some research.
For years, I went through like a lot of men, I had the battle dreams and all that, which eventually disappeared over a period of time. But that is embedded in my mind, that whole experience. But I can, once in a while, something will trigger, and I'll think about a certain situation that I can refer to that happened. And then then I'll remember a few things that I didn't remember before, that'll
Right.
come back to me. I kept diaries. And,
Well, you were-
and I don't have them. I lost them in the '72 flood here.
Oh, what a shame.
And I lost a lot of pictures and a lot of, my souvenirs and everything.
Maybe the act of just writing it down
Yeah.
has really helped your recall even at this
Well, I've
day.
written a few articles that went into our division. The division puts out a journal type of thing, a couple, 3 times a year. And we have division conventions each year.
Right.
And they've asked me to do different things. And I've submitted things that's in this book here, some of the stuff. That's just went through the flood, but
You were able
I
to.
lost a cover that as I'm telling you, there's the tour, what I was just talking about.
Sure.
But there's Ernie Pyle right there.
Okay.
This is meant for my my battery.
Obviously, you've got,
Yeah, there's their names, I wrote down.
you've written
Yeah.
down the names of
Yeah.
each person, even though there's no
Ernie
captions.
Pyle, great.
The famous
correspondent.
journalist.
Yeah, he was with us on a couple of occasions. And, let's see, what I'm talking about.
Well, this is a great resource for your own memory.
Yeah, that's near the town of, Livorno, Leghorn. That's near Leghorn.
Very good.
I used to, when they knew we were going to invade Africa, or Italy, they sent me to a place in Algiers, and they were going to teach me Italian, to speak Italian in about a week. The only problem is they taught me, they thought we were going to land down in the southern part of Calabria,
Right.
Calabrese.
Calabrese.
They taught me Calabrese, and we didn't land in that area.
Landed in
And
Sicily.
I'll tell you, if you're ever in Italy,
Well, they're very dialect,
there's about 8 dialects.
numerous
And,
dialects.
and I mean, they're so different. For example, the word understand. Capita, capisca, capito, you know.
Right.
Depending on where you are.
Depending.
Yeah.
Because Italy is sectioned off by mountains, and it's
Yeah.
their own little cultures.
There's one of my battery right there. One comes from one of my, you can see them down the line there.
Oh, yes,
Tubes.
yes.
That was, I think that was it. It's on the Gothic line.
That's what it says, yeah.
Yeah,
Fascinating.
yeah.
This is a great little book here.
105 millimeter.
Your
Now, this is my division history.
Yeah. When was this book written and published? Right after the war?
Yeah, this is, probably tells you right in the front here somewhere.
Uh, 1954.
Yeah,
So George Howe took quite a while to compile this, but obviously it's a nice,
you
accurate.
know, now there's the ruins right there, the Roman ruins.
Yep,
It's a Sabella.
there they are.
And they're right here. Actually, we went in position right here, our guns are right here.
There's well, it says a bridge, but it looks like an aqueduct.
There's Newsom. Yeah, that is an aqueduct. That's wrong. This is land on there.
Now, you mentioned that one of the guys in the tent, you were there with the Arabs, was captured.
Yeah.
Were they shipped back to Germany for
Yeah, all
incarceration?
of our men that were there, that were taken prisoner, they were flown out of Africa, back to Italy.
You never were able to.
They were put on trains.
You don't know what his final fate was by any chance. Did you ever correspond with that gentleman? I mean, there's
Oh,
probably.
yeah, I saw him after the war.
Is that right?
Yeah, at one of our conventions, yeah.
And does he regret not
Yeah.
making it
Oh,
there?
yeah, because he damn near died.
Sure.
He starved him to death.
Oh boy. Well, isn't that?
But he had no animosity towards the Germans, because he said his guards were starving to death too, so, you know, they just didn't have the food to give them.
Right.
Let's see, this is, trying to figure out what this picture of me is.
Well, how about you? Did you have any animosity towards the Germans?
No, you know, I had great admiration for their fighting ability and stamina, but I never got even with the Japanese for killing my brother, but these are generals that we captured, Van Arnhem, and
I just got to check the tape, Les. We only got an hour tape, and I want to put a new one on.
okay.
Okay, we just got a few more seconds, and then we'll put a new tape on. Well, my father said the same thing. He had no animosity towards the Germans. They were doing what they thought they were.
They would, a German soldier would fight until he fired his last bullet and only then would he surrender. But he would surrender. But when he couldn't do any more damage, not until then. But I understand the Japanese, they just would not surrender, period. Because they believed also that they would go to heaven, I guess, if they gave their life, you know, for their emperor.
From what I've read, that's what their opinion was, but.
Yeah. Anyone I never can find one.
This says it's still recording, so I guess we'll just keep that one in there for a few more minutes.
The only picture of me in here.
There is a picture of you in there?
Yep.
Oh, I'd like to see that.
But you're not gonna recognize me, because I know it's me, because I knew when the guy came up and
Right.
taken from the rear. It was right in front of casino, when we were showing around a casino.
Oh, you were involved in that action also?
Oh, yeah, Anzio, and there's an 88, a Tiger tank.
Look at the size of that gun.
That's the only good picture I've ever seen of a Tiger tank right there. And there's Fayed Pass, taken from the German side, and we were down in here.
I see.
And these are mountains in front here, so they hide behind them here. So the road goes this way. That's Fayed Pass.
You're right, the terrain is quite more mountainous than I would have assumed.
Yeah, well, that's the Atlas Mountains, and that's really the only mountain range there.
There's a nice picture of you.
Yeah, that was taken in Rome, Italy, after I came out of the hospital. That's not the good. That's the only picture? That's not the best one. That one there, I think, is a better one.
So yourself.
Oh, here, this is me right here. And this is Joe Vogel, my, one of the other enlistment. And this is, Monica was right up here. From the Corning Glass Works disease. Psychosis.
Really? Okay, Les, we're back on the camera. And I think you were just telling me that your mother had lived a long time after the war and seen you and your brother's military service. And I think, is there anything else you wanted to tell me out of the, this is the division history book?
Well, I'm just showing you this here. There's a good
This
map.
is- yeah,
We
shows
came
all-
down along here, and then landed here. And then we
Your action in North Africa?
ran and came all the way across to Tunisia. I guess to give you a little better idea.
Yes, this is very good.
That's where that long railroad deal was, on a train going to Tunisia. Had fighting down here and then going back up north. When we defeated the Germans at Kasserine Pass and we moved up to get into the last stages, our objective was to take Bizerta, and the British were to take Tunis, which we did after a couple of weeks of very hard fighting and very heavy casualties.
Your unit suffered many.
Yeah, we lost
Large casualties.
We lost large numbers of casualties. There, fighting on Hill 609. I was an observer. I was on the run off the hill 3 different times. The Germans we'd take it, and then the Germans would counterattack and run us off. And that happened three times when we finally held it. Then after we did hold it the last time, we were able then, having that high ground, to see all the way to Mature. And we captured Mature is on the way to that's breaking down out of the mountains into the plains, and we took Matur, city of Matur, and as we were coming out of,
Basically, you've got the Germans cut off right here.
you know,
Now, how many Germans were actually captured in North Africa? Do you have any idea?
yeah, there was a couple 100,000.
Wow.
There was the whole army, actually two armies, the Africa Corps and the German First Army.
This is the first time the German army really had dealt with defeat. This was before Russia, I believe.
Yeah, right, well, Russia was about to happen, or was happening, Kursk, I think, at that particular time. But we captured the city of Matur, and as we were pulling out of Matur, a little incident happened there. We come under fire from some German tanks on a hill above us, and we heard a lot of shooting on the other side of the hill, and it was 3 P-38s, our own planes that were shooting, because we had advanced way ahead of our own people on the other side of the hill, when the German, and when our fighter planes were strafing the Germans on the other side, they jumped up over the hill and they spotted us and thought we were Germans.
So you were strafed?
And they banked around and came to, and I had the back door of my half track open. I looked right out the back, right into the propellers of this first P-38, and he strafed our whole column and set our half track on fire. And some of the men got slightly wounded. Nobody was hurt seriously. And the second plane, then he stopped firing. He realized a mistake and wagged his wings. And the second plane had just started firing, and he stopped. And then the third plane didn't fire at all. And they circled around and to come back to wag their wings at us to let us know they'd made a mistake. And when they did that, our captain got all shook up and said, "We'll throw out a smoke grenade, a yellow smoke grenade." The identification.
Right.
Says,
He was nervous that they were going to...
I said, no, don't do that. And he did anyhow, and when he did, a German battery, a Fort Observer, spotted us. And then they really started laying the artillery in, and the captain said, "Get out there and cover up that grenade." Smoke grenade. We went on and took the town of Ferryville on the end of the lake there, and fought all the way on up in and took the port of Bizerta, which is one of your larger cities in North Africa.
Right.
Largest.
And obviously a key strategic...
Yeah, Bizerta and Tunis are about the same size. They're the largest cities in Tunisia, the two largest cities. And then that ended the African campaign. Then we ended up with all these there's a tour for the end. Here's all of the prisoners there, thousands of them.
Yes, you can see that from...
Then for a few days after the campaign ended there, my division was camped right over here in bivouac, and each day we had to send men down to guard these prisoners. And I had a funny thing happen there. I had a kid in my outfit, his name was Mike Gross, and he was from Long Island and spoke very fluent German. And he and I were in one of these towers here one day, and there were a couple of Germans who would walk up to the foot of the tower, look up at us, and yell at us in German. And I asked Mike, "What are they saying?" And he said, "They're swearing at us. They're calling us SOBs and so forth." And I said, "Well," so I said, "I'll put an end to that." So I bumped around into my Tommy gun, and I said, "What are you going to do?" And I'd just scare him, shoot around him. And he said, no. He said, "I'll take care of it." So when we get back to my outfit over here the next day, he's up in an olive tree and with a saw, and he's making himself a slingshot. And picks these hard olives off the tree and puts them in his bag. The next day when we're in the tower, the same German prisoners came up to the bottom of that tower and they're swearing again. And as they turned, they're all with shaved heads now. The whole Africa Corps had shaved heads. And he would put a olive in and cork him in the head. that ended that.
That didn't violate the Geneva
No, that
Treaty?
That ended that.
That's
That was kind
interesting.
of funny.
Wow.
Anyhow, then we, they moved, then, believe it or not, here we go again. When the campaign ends, there's the map.
You're
When
on
it
your,
ends, they moved us all the way back
they took you all the way back to,
to Rabat in French Morocco,
I see that,
okay?
which is
In
about,
the meantime,
it's the length of the Mediterranean Sea.
Patton was putting the 7th Army together to take Sicily,
Yes.
okay? And then we didn't get in on the Sicily fighting. But then we were there for a couple of months getting ready. Then we went to, some of the convoy left out Iran. We went all the way back again to Algiers on that same railroad, loaded on ships and went in on the invasion of Italy.
Anzio,
Yeah, at Salerno.
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 Let me ask you a question. Between the North African campaign and the Italian invasion, what did you do in Rabat? Just maneuver, train?
Yeah, and in Rabat, we were right here on the tip was Spanish Morocco.
Yes.
Now, Spanish Morocco was neutral,
Okay.
and Spain was neutral,
Correct. Yep.
but Portugal fought with us. There was always a fear that Spain, and she owned the other side, which was Spanish Morocco, would shut the
The
strait.
Strait of Gibraltar off.
So they always had to have a big force here to make sure that strait kept open.
Makes sense.
So when we pulled out, another outfit from the States come in and took that duty over. But that's why we went back there, really.
Now, did you have any opportunity for leave between the North
Well,
Africa?
we used to go into town, into Rabat. See, Rabat is where the Sultan's palace is. It's a beautiful city. There's a picture in there, palm trees. And, we was bivouacked on the edge of town. I thought there was, I don't know where it is.
It looks like the weather would have been very nice because it's, you had the ocean breezes.
Yeah, the weather was very nice, real hot.
Right.
When we were down in the southern part of Tunisia fighting, we were right on the edge of the Sahara Desert there, but that was very hot there. You can see what the Atlas Mountains, they're huge.
Yes,
They're
I did.
snow-capped.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, they're snow-capped. Yeah, it's in there, but when they try to find something there, you can't do it. A picture of Rabat, where the Sultan's palace is, and we'd go in, have leave there. We had where we were bivouacked outside of Rabat. We were right near a little harbor, which had all sand beach and beautiful swimming, and a little harbor that was full of octopus, and we'd go out and catch octopus. And
Now, you had mentioned earlier about your friend, I think you said,
that's the vehicle right there he was in.
yeah, I see that.
When he ran over
He
the
died over, because of a
Yeah.
landmine.
Yep, that's the vehicle he was in. He ran into this, off the road. We were being strafed by German planes,
So
and the captain told him to find a place for us to get off the road, and he drove into this area where there was a French soldier standing there who only spoke French, and he was yelling something at Bert, apparently telling him it was a minefield, and he didn't know what he was saying. And drove right on the mine.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, you're being, in your narrative here, you were in the forefront of a lot of fighting. Were you awarded any medals or citations?
Yeah, I have the I have a Bronze Star, I have a Purple Heart, I have the American Defense Medal, the European African Campaign Medal, I have the Good Conduct Medal, and the POW medal.
But, all right, maybe you haven't told me that part yet. Were you an actual POW?
Well, they considered me
Okay.
because I was.
You had been,
But there's a question there because my captain said he put it in for the POW medal, and then they said, well, to be an official prisoner of war, the enemy has to have your serial number recorded. And we didn't know it at the time, but when they brought us back, after this ended, they were interviewing us that were overrun by the Germans, asking us if we didn't know what it was all about. If we'd have said yes, they took our POW, we wouldn't have had to fight anymore. Because once you're a prisoner of war, if you escape or are released, if they capture the second time, they have the right to shoot you. Right?
I see,
So
I see.
they don't put you in that.
They don't want you in that
Position.
situation.
So and he didn't ask me. He didn't have time. He just jumped out of that tank and
Took your class rank.
Yeah, and my
Was it your
my pistol and my money, whatever I had in my pocket.
Was it your high school class rank?
Yeah, it was my high school class ring, yeah. And that we had all those thousands of prisoners. I went all over trying to find that German. I never could find them.
Okay.
So that's the same ring right there. No, that's not the one. The other one. They took the class ring and this ring. This is a duplicate of one my first wife that I had. She got me another one.
Very nice.
So.
Well, speaking of your family, how did you stay in touch with them during the war?
Email, writing,
Right.
so the only way
Right.
you could is,
Your brothers were in other branches of the service,
yeah.
and your mother.
Once in a while, I would get a letter from one of my brothers. Roland, the one that was in the submarine. In fact, when he went in the service, I was already in, and he told me that he was going to join up. I says, well, if you're going to go into service, make sure you don't get in the infantry, in the Army. So when I heard he was in the Navy, I felt a lot better, but I didn't know that he was going in submarines.
As you mentioned, where was his submarine
It was in
sunk?
Yeah, it was sunk in the Battle of Makassar Straits. I think it was. His submarine was. The Japanese fleet was coming down from the north, and to intercept the fleet in these straits, the captain of the submarine got orders to move his sub through the straits at night, and he refused it because the straits were mined, and every time he refused the order, it came down from a higher source. And finally, I think the admiral of the fleet or some finally said, "Take that sub through." And when he did, he hit a mine, and there were only about six survivors. And they were the ones they went through the straits at night with just a conning tower out of the water. And those that were in the conning tower were blown up out of the sub into the water, and they were the only survivors.
Amazing.
And the captain came to visit my mother after the war, because they had always listed him as missing, because there was no bodies. So, but he came and said he didn't survive, there's no way he could have. So the sub went down immediately, and the only survivors are the ones with him.
You think the captain visited every one of?
Yeah, he went around to visit all the families of all of the ones that were lost in the sub.
Wow. Let me just make sure we're recording properly here.
Yep.
Very good. Okay, now if you wanted to continue, I'd like to hear about the Italian campaign.
Okay, then we loaded on the Algiers and went and landed there in north of Salerno. And then we took one bypassed Napoli, and went on up through, across the Volturno River, Caserta, and went right on up to the Mignano Gap, which is about 15 miles south of Cassino, where the Germans had put up their big resistance to their winter line. This was about the time of Christmas. It started to snow.
Christmas of 40,
44,
43.
43.
Christmas of 43.
43. And we did a lot of heavy fighting there. One was trying to take a town called San Pietro. And we lost some of our own men there. We lost one of our own lieutenants who had been a staff sergeant in Africa and gone back to OCS after the African campaign ended, went to England to OCS, came back to us as a second lieutenant. And we were out on this hill just short of Cassino, and we were spotted by German artillery, and they laid a barrage in him, and he was killed instantly. And there was another sergeant, myself, we hauled him back, and the next day we lost our captain. He stepped on a mine, an S mine, a shoe mine.
What's a shoe mine?
SCHU. We call them actually shoes, SHOE, a mine. They're a mine that, anti-personnel mine. You step on them and you hear a pop. And the mine shoots up in the air, and it gets about 6 or 7 feet in the air, and it explodes and shoots around iron balls about that big around in all directions.
Well, that's a
And
very...
generally, when somebody steps on it, a shoe mine, you hear the pop, and then whoever hears it yells S mine, and when the minute you hear somebody yell, you hit the ground. And your chances are very good of surviving if you hit the ground, because it just goes like that, like a scythe. And the captain, I think, was a little bit hard of hearing, and I don't know whether he heard it or not, but he stepped on it and it exploded, and one of the balls went right straight through the middle of him, came out the back. And believe it or not, he was back in combat just a few weeks later. That ball went straight through him and never hit anything vital. Never hit his spine, never hit any bone, never hit any organs that...
Wow, he's a lucky guy.
It was amazing. When we saw that, we figured, well, we bought that farm. So, just as after we took San Pietro, and we were fighting on the edge of Mount Portia, which is just prior to Cassino, we got the orders that we were being pulled off the lines to go back to Napoli, to load to go around and land at Anzio.
Which is
behind the Germans.
south of Naples.
No, north.
North, okay, I'm sorry.
Way north, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know whether,
You did have a map there.
well, here's Anzio
Yeah.
here, but that's Anzio itself.
So what did you think of this strategy, or?
Well, they knew that they weren't going to break through that line there without taking horrendous casualties in months, and they tried it for months there at Cassino.
Right.
And so they figured, well, they'll bypass it, get around it. So we landed with a couple of other divisions at Anzio, and then we went on, we fought there at Anzio for 6 or 7 months, couldn't break out, and the whole beachhead for all that period of time was always under German observation and fire. And many battles were fought back and forth, and the Germans tried to push us into the sea a number of times, just flooding panzer divisions down the road at us. And finally, we built up enough troops on the beachhead, and they brought in other divisions down on the southern front, on the casino front, and with the 2 coordinated attacks, we finally broke the German lines, and then we flowed into Rome.
Rome was
Yeah.
declared an open city.
And we were one of the first units to go into Rome. And in the history of mankind or warfare, we were the only army that ever took Rome from the south. All of the armies through history, Rome was never captured from the south until our army did.
There you go. That's quite an
We
accomplishment.
pulled right in as we were going around the pictures in here at the Colosseum. I was in a half-track, and there were German snipers in the top of the Colosseum shooting down at us. And we were not allowed to shoot back at them because of the historical.
I see. Even though the Germans had agreed it would be an open city,
Yeah,
there was still some
yeah.
sniper action.
Yeah, they didn't, they did not agree to Rome, or Rome being an open city, really. The commander of Rome, the German commander, was given orders from Hitler to do all the damage he could do.
Is
But he didn't.
that right?
He happened to be an art lover and everything, and
Respected
and,
the
you know,
culture.
and he just didn't, but they did blow up a lot of railroad stations and other installations, and what we ran into really was just rear guard action to keep us from overrunning great numbers of their troops, so they would fight at various street corners. In fact, when we went by the Vatican, they, as we came around the edge of the Vatican, we heard a lot of cheering and that, and we looked, and here was, I don't know whether it was the Pope but there were cardinals and that came out of the front of St. Peter's, and there were a number of American prisoners and that they had been hiding in there. They came out to cheer us, greet us as we went by.
Wow, that must have been
Yeah.
quite a feeling on your
As
part.
as we got near the edge of Rome, that's when they caught up with me with a telegram about my brother. And then just as we finally cleared Rome, we pulled into a bivouac on the edge of it before we took the port of Civitavecchia, which is the port of Rome. Before we took that, we had a day's reprieve to repair our vehicles and tanks and gas up, and a day's rest, and then I had charge of a detail to go back to visit St. Peter's and the Vatican. And I had charge of I had a truckload of guys, and when we got there, we only had enough time to either have an audience with the Pope or see in St. Peter's, or the Vatican, the art galleries and all that. The guys had their choice. I wasn't even a Catholic, but I chose to have an audience with the Pope.
Who was the Pope at the time?
Pope Pius
Pope Pius the sixth?
6, I think.
Yes. Wow.
And so I had that opportunity. In fact, we had a little problem to begin with. When we got up there, his secretary or something came and we had sidearms out. And he says, you can't wear a sidearm in the presence of the Pope. I says, I'm not allowed to take it off. So there was they went back, there was a lot of discussion and so forth, and they agreed that we didn't have to take the, but what we did, we took the clips out of the guns. And,
Okay, a little compromise.
Yeah, we took the clips out of the guns.
Now, you mentioned in this picture that you were recovering in a
Yeah,
Rome hospital?
Yeah, I was in a hospital in Rome. I had malaria fever. I had contacted in Africa, and I had yellow jaundice real bad, and I had let's see now, it's yeah, that was from the malaria and the jaundice. I got so I couldn't even stand up. I was so weak. I had dysentery, and then they sent me back there for about a week, and to get me built up again.
right.
And
So-
and then that was taken at a restaurant near the Trevi Fountain,
The Trevi Fountain.
right across the street from the Trevi Fountain.
Very good.
Yep.
Okay, so did you have anything special on your campaigns? It was a good luck charm, or felt it brought you good luck?
No, I can't think of. I didn't have the proverbial rabbit's foot or anything like that.
Okay.
I'm a believer that you make your own luck.
You seem to have done. How about pranks that maybe you would pull in?
I'm the world's master at that.
Oh, yeah?
You want to hear something?
I'd like to hear some of your pranks.
Well, back in Africa, when the campaign ended and we went back there to Rabat, that got to be real monotonous, you know.
You were there for a couple months.
Yeah, and so it got to the point the practical jokes started, you know, doing these different things and doing things in guys' mess kits and, you know. So everybody's trying to top each other one. So I thought up of this idea. We had, when we moved into an area and we knew we were going to be there for weeks, the engineers would come down and dig a big slip trench and build a 10-holer, 5-to-5, 5 in the back, put 2 big timbers across the ditch and build boxes to sit on, you know, toilets.
I was going to say latrine,
Yeah, latrine, okay.
latrine trench.
Yeah, so after we were there for a couple of weeks, you know, and all these practical jokes were going on and who could be the tops, I got this idea and I went out there one night. I borrowed a saw from the maintenance department and I sawed those 2 timbers about 3/4 of the way through.
You weakened them.
Well, I'll tell you something. If I couldn't have planned it and sawed it any more perfect, because when the 10th guy got on there was a big crack and they all went right down in the hole. And the captain had lined everybody up the next day to find out who did that, and he never did it. And a number of years, and back in the States at a convention, our captain was there, and the fellows had been drinking, and they've been reminiscing about the war. The captain says, I never found out, he said, that who did that latrine job, and I says, you're looking at him.
Did he laugh or did he?
Yeah, he laughed then, but at the time he didn't laugh. So I won the prize.
There you
Yeah, I
go.
won
That was a good
that
one.
was, yeah.
Well, hey, it did break up the monotony.
Yeah.
That's
No,
interesting.
there were all kinds of stuff going on. You know, what we would do each night, like especially on the Anzio beachhead, to endure that shelling, there were 4 or 5 of us guys, we'd get together and sing, harmonize. We'd get around the executive track where all of the information come in. We're outside for the guns and then sent out to the guns by wire, telephone. And And we'd kind of congregate there each night, and we'd sing all these songs that we would make up and so forth. So, and then joke telling and like that, you know, to get through the tough parts.
In Anzio, were you supplied by ships?
Yeah, yeah, that's, everything was supplied by ship.
That's how you were able to maintain the
Yeah,
beachhead?
the officers on the beachhead got American whiskey ration. They kept everybody loaded to endure the shelling. And the enlisted men, we got local cognac, Italian cognac, which was by far better than the American and the English whiskey. In fact, the officers used to trade their Shenleys and Johnny Walkers
some,
also that Italian cognac.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Huh.
Once in a while, they would have a beer ration. That was very rare, though.
I can imagine that would be
Yeah.
to take up a lot of room in the ship to
Yeah, right.
supply the troops.
But,
Okay, well, if you want to just continue through the
yeah, they,
tank campaign,
yeah, we
and
were there on the Anzio fighting there for months, and then took Rome, and then we fought, the Germans fought a rear guard action all the way up for a couple of weeks till we approached,
mentioned Pisa earlier.
yeah, we approached Leghorn first, Livorno, and we had quite a battle taking that port. And then we went on to take Pisa, and Pisa is separated by the Arno River there. And where's my coat?
Where is your
Oh,
coat?
here.
Here.
Oh, I had some pictures of them. I got pictures of the,
There you go.
I think I got pictures here of William Tower. We came up to the, and describe these pictures to you in a minute. That's just before Pisa, that's along the coast, there's Cesena. Coastal defenses. There's a dead German. Gun we knocked out.
A dead German?
Yeah, we knocked that gun, knocked that gun. I thought I had a picture of your Marine car. I can't believe it.
I don't see one. Wait, what's this?
No, that's at Como. That's where the campaign, that's where we ended up. Huh. There it is.
Oh, yeah.
I took this picture and I lost the other one in the flood of me. This is.
Now that's
this-
you.
No, this is Hugh Cunningham.
Okay.
Here's a kid from Elmira. He just died here a couple of years ago.
Hugh Cunningham?
Yeah, Hugh Cunningham, he drove my half-track. He
Okay.
was with me all the way through. As we came up to the Arno River, we were shelling the Germans going through Pisa, and I spotted some German artillery observers up here on
In the actual tower.
the. So there was a lieutenant with me, and this lieutenant had a bad case of stutters. When he got excited, he stuttered. I don't know how he ever got in the army, especially as for
A
observer.
command
anyhow.
position.
Anyhow, I said, Lieutenant, I says, we ought to knock the leaning tower down. There's Germans using it up there. We've got observers there. See them with their monoculars looking at us. We can't do that, you know. So I said, no, let's have some fun. So I radioed back coordinates of the leaning tower. And I says, enemy observation post request 1 round of smoke to adjust And I gave the coordinates, and there was a long silence. They come back on radio, repeat those coordinates. And I repeat the coordinates. And finally, it come back and says, that's not the Leaning Tower of Pisa, is it? And I says, yeah. And I said, well, you can't, that's one of the 7 wonders of the world. You can't drop around within a mile of that on either side. I said, yeah, but they're using it to observe us with. That's all right, you can't shoot at that.
So how did they
But
find?
that was my experience.
How did they?
So we couldn't take Pisa. We could have probably, but we'd take it. So we went on up the Arno River and took the town of Pontedera. And that's the place where I told you where we holed up in the church. I had this partisan girl that took us in, Italian girl that took us through the lines at night. And we barricaded ourselves in the church, and then we took the town on the other side of the river, and then came back, and we took Pisa from the rear then. So we didn't lose all the casualties like that.
And you saved the tower.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they wouldn't let us. I was just joking when I gave the coordinates. I wanted to see what the reaction was. I didn't say it was Leaning Tower.
Well, they were sharp enough to figure it out.
Yeah.
So, okay, now, after the Italy campaign, I believe you were involved in Normandy operation?
No, I went on up the mountains. We were just holed up in the next winter there in the mountains north of, or just south of Bologna, where you break down into the plain, into the Po Valley. And from there, I got slightly wounded. One of the lieutenants with me stepped on a mine and lost a leg, and I got hit here. And while I was recuperating, I came down with a very bad case of dysentery, and my jaundice came back. So then, back at the hospital there in Rome, the second time, they looked at my war records and said, my God, you've been out over here this long. And so the colonel says, well, we're going to give you a soft job back here around Rome. You can drive a general around or something like that. And I says, no. He says, what do you mean, no? I says, well, if I'm well enough to stay in the Army, send me back to my unit. He said, you can't do that. And I said, well, then send me home. They said, you serious? And I said, yeah. So they sent me home.
Really?
So they come back on a hospital ship in Charleston, and I was in the Stark General Hospital down there for some weeks, and then came back up and was in a recovery rehab hospital on Long Island. And
Recovering just from the malaria
yeah,
and
getting my
building your strength up.
and
Getting
getting my head together, because to go from that right back in the civilian life, they were giving us a little buffer there to check us out, and I had a nice duty while I was there. That's when they made me temporary first sergeant. Each weekend, they would let a number of men go home that were men that had been badly wounded and had different types of things, faces shot off and arms and legs missing. And so the first time I came home, weekend I came home, they had a second lieutenant in charge of the detail, and it didn't work out too good. And for a number of reasons I don't want to go into. Anyhow, when I went back, they called me in, and the colonel wanted to know what happened. I said, well, you'd be better off if you put an enlisted man in charge instead of,
an officer.
And I says, of course, some of these were master sergeants, and I was only a staff sergeant. So he said, well, you got the job. I said, yeah, I'm only a staff sergeant. Well, you're a first sergeant, put the stripes on. It's a temporary says it's not in the table of organization, you can't make it permanent, so while you're here, you're the first sergeant in charge of the barracks, and so almost every weekend there for a while, I would come back with a train load coming out of Long Island, dropping off men at different towns. Their parents had to meet them there, or someone responsible.
In
Some of them
around New York City,
all the
or
way back to Hornell.
really?
Yeah, all the way, every stop, they'd leave off a man or two, and there would be somebody to meet them. Some of the soldiers were blind, and some, and had one that had this terribly, wore a mask, had a thing, all you could see was his eyes, wore this, because his face is completely gone. And they would brief me before I left. They'd give me a clipboard, tell me each soldier's problem and who was to meet them and so forth. And then I was to pick them up on the way back and the money. And so, I had the first sobering experience I ever had of that is, if you can picture Grand Central Station during the war. You ever been to Grand Central?
I have been in there.
Thousands of people
Busy.
talking and milling through there. And here I come into that station and I'm leading about 12 or 14 men on crutches, one with a guy with a mask and that. And as we moved across that floor real slowly, the noise started to subside until there was no noise at all.
Hard to
And
imagine.
the people just stood there and looked at us, And
Out of
and
respect?
a lot of them had, well, they were taken back, I think, A lot of them hadn't been exposed to anything,
I see.
like this. Because these guys were really legs gone, and in fact, there's one I'll never forget when we got on the train. This guy with the mask, he would just sit there and he couldn't talk. Most of the jawbone was gone. And a little bit of girl came up to him and sat next to him. And she offered him a pack of gum, and he kind of shook his head, and I tapped him on the shoulder and went like that, take the gum. And so he took the gum. This little girl sat there with him until he got off the train and got up the train, and I think it was around Deposit, New York, or someplace like that.
Uh-huh.
And but I had a lot of experiences with that detail.
Oh, yeah, that's certainly interesting.
I had some really.
Just check to see if that's still going okay. We're on our second tape.
I had this one kid that was shot up real bad, and he was East Orange, New Jersey, or someplace. I left him off, and he had his parents and his fiance met him at the station, and the parents came right up to him, and hugged him. And she stood back, and she had this funny look in her face, and she wasn't dealing with this.
Right.
And when I can't remember what time, I think it was East Orange.
You said East Orange,
It
yeah.
was East Orange, and when the train's, I'm waiting to pick them up, and the mother was the only one at the station, and committed suicide.
Oh, my God.
Went out in the barn and hung himself. I think it was because of his girl.
Oh,
She couldn't handle it.
wow. The best effort movie.
But those are the kind of things,
Yeah.
here the war is over and still going on.
Right. The effects are.
Well, we went on up through by division, of course, not without me, then went on all the way up through the Alps and ended up in Austria.
I saw your map showed
Ended
Austria.
up in Austria.
Yeah.
As Army of Occupation.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, Les, let me, after the war, did you take advantage of the GI Bill?
No, when I came out of the service, when I was discharged, my health was still bad. And I couldn't eat, and I was on medication. I was taking quinine real bad. I was having bouts of malaria. And I wanted in the worst way I wanted to go into forestry. I wanted to go to Syracuse. And I went up there, took the entrance exams and everything, and they said because of my health condition, they would not recommend that I enter at that time. But they'd hold it open, you know, so I never did get the second opportunity.
It's too
So I
bad.
never used the GI Bill.
It's too bad. Where did you work after the?
When I first came out of the service, I got a job through a friend of mine that he was an artillery pilot of one of the planes after the war, was coming through Elmira, remembered me, stopped, and he was flying for TWA, Transworld Airlines. And at that time they had a school in Kansas City, Missouri, that they were training radio operators and station agents and ticket agents and all that out there. And he got me a job representing TWA, and they sent me up in an office in Albany. And I did that for a couple of years until the Korean War started. And then when the Korean War started, the government took that school over, the training school, so they didn't need us fieldmen. So I lost my job there, and then the school went private after that, and after the Korean War. So I didn't go back to it. And then since then, I worked for American France for a few years, and with the Board of Underwriters, and then I worked a number of years as a salesman for Worth Cigar Company.
Which cigar company?
Worth.
Worth?
Yeah.
What was their brand of cigar?
Well, they carried all kinds. They were like Elmira Tobacco.
I see.
They were Elmira Tobacco's competitor.
Like a wholesaler.
Competitor. In fact, Elmira Tobacco bought them out.
I see.
And when they bought them out, I left them and then went selling for N.J. Thompson Company, you know.
That was a dry goods wholesale, yeah.
Sold them till they went out of business.
You're putting a lot of people out of business.
Yeah, gee, every place I went out of business, you know. So I told George Howell, when Howell Packaging hired me, FM Howell Company. I worked there until I retired.
Okay.
Yeah, about 20 years on the road as a salesman for FM Howell.
Oh my God.
And then after I retired from it, after I sat around for about a year, and I'm mowing the lawn one day, and Bob Roller stopped. He was the head of
Solid waste.
solid waste, and he said, "Bob, come up to me while I'm mowing the lawn." So I got just a job for you. I said, "I'm retired, I want a job." He said, "Nah, that's not a job, position. Take it, if you don't like it, quit." So I said, "Maybe I'll try it for a year, something to do." He said, "That's what, 18 years?"
I was going to say.
18 years, and I'm still there.
Some of the questions that they ask for guidelines is, have you continued any of your relationships from the service, and are you a member of a veterans organization? And obviously, you had mentioned earlier that you're still active.
Yeah, this was taken at one of the conventions here a few years ago.
You still get
But
together.
they're most of them are all dead now.
And you're 86?
84.
84. So you
Yeah.
were born in 1919?
Right.
How long ago was this picture? Oh, let's see if it says.
Tells you,
here.
I mean.
1990.
Yeah.
So, wow.
Yeah, I don't have any of my last buddy died here just a few months ago. The only one that really is left is my captain, one of my captains.
Uh-huh.
The one that stepped on the mine, he's a banker down in Texas. I think it's Breckenridge, Texas.
He must be retired as a banker.
Oh, yeah, he's retired. too,
Yes,
yeah.
that was his occupation.
Yeah, but out of my battalion, or out of my battery you got about 120 men in the battery. The captain is, and there's a kid down in Florida, Robbie Robinson, there's the only two that I know that are still alive. So,
Well, you certainly had a,
but that's basically when it,
well, I appreciate you taking the time
I
to
can,
share.
but to get into describing some of the real tough stuff, I wouldn't know how to put it in words.
I understand.
That I've tried to do that, and I can remember the humorous things and the things that, you know, that let you survive.
Is this one of your British,
Well, that's me.
well,
That was taken at Fort Knox.
obviously
At Fort
before,
Knox, where I even
they
got
changed
into the
it,
91st.
before they changed the helmets.
Yeah, that's the old style helmet for it. And this here is me. This
Okay.
is the kid I told you that smoked German gross.
Right?
We went back in Italy to visit my cousin, Tommy Cosgrove, in the middle. He worked for a trucking outfit, was assigned to a trucking outfit, that supplied my division. And that's why you see a tent. We never was lucky enough to have tents.
Well, so how was your, like when you bivouacked in Rabit there, what were you in? Like just,
So Rabat,
Rabat.
we were on the ground in shelter halves,
wow,
up tents. This is with the half tracks.
yeah.
50 caliber machine gun on top. That's a leaning tower. This is one of my lieutenants, a terrific guy from, his name was Hog Leg Ramsel. From Hog County, Texas.
Wow.
There's my cousin and I there. There's me on the beachhead.
Is that a beachhead?
That's on Anzio beachhead.
Okay, I just, with the trees in the background,
Yeah,
or,
that's on Anzio beachhead. That's taken on side of Rome. That's me there on the right, and Murphy on the left. That's a big field.
yeah, you can see the size of it.
240 millimeter. It was behind us when we went back one day. We come off the lines there in Italy one day. We went back in what's the outfit?
I think, you are going to, you've signed, you know, this is, like, as we said, for the
If
library.
you're gonna use these, you wanna know about these, you better.
Right, that's what we want to do now.
That's Bernard,
That's your brother, Bernard.
Bernard J. Cosgrove.
You mind if I just write a number 1 on this? Because that's how we're gonna log it. Is this our copy?
Yeah, I think that's yours, isn't it?
Okay,
I don't know.
yeah.
Yes, yeah. I got the pictures, originals back. That's
Well, the place is just a studio portrait, is that correct?
What's that?
They want me to put down the place, it's just a studio portrait.
Yeah, that's probably, yeah.
He was in the Navy.
Naval Air Force. They stationed all over the country, different places, so.
And boy, okay, right here, well, it says 1944.
I don't think there's anything on the back there.
And,
Yeah, he's living in the Heights now.
well, I'll tell you what, you know, and I'm gonna, you know, if he wants to sit down sometime and go over his experiences, we'd be glad to do it.
And that's Roland.
Photographer would not be known, I don't believe.
No, no way of telling me.
Okay, now this, Okay. Oops. Okay, this will be number 2. This is your brother Harold, right?
Yeah, Harold Cosgrove. He's deceased 2 years ago.
Well, longevity runs in your family, I would say.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have some people that need to put something up back there before the
No problem.
I apologize.
Now, that picture there is when he was in the,
Coast Guard,
no, not Coast Guard, I'm wrong, Merchant Marine.
merchant marine.
And then he went into the paratroopers afterwards. I don't have a picture of him in paratroopers.
Wow, that's,
Yeah, he wasn't getting enough action in yeah, that's the last place I want to be is the Merchant Marine. So the ships they lost. But he, and that's me taking him Rome, Italy, right across the street from the Trevi Fountain. That one I want to be setting.
and the date is, this would be what,
That would be
1943?
43.
Any idea of the month?
Probably,
16.5 inches from that left side, is where the left edge is gonna line up.
I just need to get time we have.
Can you send the picture how you go?
No, that would be 44.
44? It looks to me
Yeah.
like it's summer there, but I
Yeah,
can't.
it would be, it was, I think around September.
Yeah, it might be fall.
August or September of 44.
Okay. Your brother here, do you have any idea when that picture was taken?
That was probably been taken in about 1944. I don't know what month.
Well, this is Rollins with the 4th photograph.
Yeah, no, that would have been taken in 43, early 43.
You don't know these photographers. These are actual military portraits, I believe.
Probably,
Yeah. This last one is of you again. It's the same. It's just a different.
That was taken by an Italian photographer.
Okay. I don't know why they asked. In case they wanted to trace it down. Okay.
There was no water in the Trevi Fountain then either.
Why is that? I'm curious.
The Germans blew up the water system.
Oh. Wow.
Beautiful city, Rome.
I have been there. And yes, it is.
Northern Italy is the most beautiful place in the world. I love it there. I could live there. Get up around Firenze, Florence.
Florence. Yep.
Yeah.
Firenze. Your Italian lessons that they gave you that week of, they went well with you.
Straight out of there.
You pronounced the Italian cities, Napoli, Firenze,
Milano, Ligorn, Livorno, Roma,
Roma,
Napoli.
Napoli.
Are you putting the table?
Yeah, it's funny how the different dialects,
That one's
how they change over there. You can drive 20 miles and the dialect changes.
that paper. Do you want to staple that?
Yes, I knew that.
Are we going vertically?
Well, Les, I thank you for your time. I certainly enjoyed it.
Okay,
And
if you need anything further, just give me a buzz.
absolutely, I got your number.
Okay.
Heather, I'm not